The boy didn't look like a beggar at first. That was the thing that stayed with Harrison Caldwell long after that Tuesday morning. How the child had been standing so still at the corner of Magnolia and Fifth, holding a paper cup of coffee with both hands like it was the most precious thing in the world, and how the steam had curled up around his small face in the cold November air, and how Harrison had almost walked right past him. Almost. It was the shoes that stopped him. Harrison had spent 23 years in commercial real estate, and somewhere in that time he'd developed the habit of looking at people's shoes first. You could tell almost everything about a person from their shoes. This boy's were the wrong size by at least 2 sizes, adult sneakers, men's, held together at the toe with silver electrical tape, and the laces on the left one had been knotted so many times that the knot itself was bigger than a golf ball. The boy couldn't have been older than 11. "Sir," the boy said, before Harrison could say anything. His voice was steady, which was the second thing that surprised him. Not the trembling whisper of a child asking for charity, just steady. Like a person stating a fact. "This coffee is yours. I think you dropped it back there, on the steps of the parking garage." Then he looked at the boy. "I didn't drop any coffee this morning." The boy blinked. Something shifted behind his eyes, a quick calculation, and then he looked down at the cup in his hands. "Oh," a pause. "I was going to give it back. Keep it. I don't need charity." "I know," Harrison said, though he didn't know that at all. "I meant it's cold and you're holding it and I don't want it." The boy considered this for a moment with the gravity of someone signing a contract. Then he took a sip. His name was Felix, Harrison found out later. Much later. In those first weeks he was just the boy at the corner, something that nagged at Harrison, the way a song you can't remember the name of nags at you, present and unresolved, surfacing at odd moments, during board meetings, at his kitchen table at 11 at night, standing in the shower with the water going cold because he hadn't noticed. His son, Lachlan, found out about the boy before Harrison ever thought to mention it. "Rossetti said he saw you talking to some homeless kid on Fifth," Lachlan said one evening, not looking up from his phone. He was 22 and long and angular like his mother had been, all elbows and sharp opinions. And lately he'd started wearing his hair pushed back from his face in a way that made him look, Harrison thought, uncomfortably adult. "He said you were out there for like 20 minutes. It was 4 minutes. Why?" Harrison poured himself a glass of water. Outside the kitchen window, the city was doing its usual evening thing. Horns, voices, the thrum of something large moving through traffic. "He found my coffee. Did you lose your coffee?" "No." Lachlan finally looked up. He had the particular expression he'd been wearing for the past year or so, ever since he'd joined the company. A sort of permanent mid-level skepticism, like he was always waiting for Harrison to make a mistake he could gently point out. "Dad, you cannot just—" "I didn't do anything, Lachlan. I talked to a child." "You talked to a homeless child on a street corner for 4 minutes, and now you're thinking about it." Harrison set his glass down. Did Rossetti have anything useful to say, or just that? The thing was, he was thinking about it. That was the problem. Harrison Caldwell had spent the better part of a decade being careful not to feel things too strongly. After Margaret died, 6 years ago now, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, he'd gone through the predictable stages and then arrived somewhere that his therapist called functional equilibrium, and that Harrison privately called getting through the day without anything breaking. It worked well enough. He ran his company. He ate breakfast. He went to his son's baseball games, back when Lachlan still played, and then later he went to Lachlan's company presentations with the same attentive expression. He was present. He functioned. He had not, in 6 years, stood on a street corner thinking about a child's shoes. He went back on Thursday. The boy was there, same corner, different cup. This one, the distinctive red of a gas station hot chocolate. He was reading something. A paperback so worn the cover had come off entirely, holding the spine with a kind of habitual tenderness. "You're back," the boy said without looking up. "I work 2 blocks that way." Harrison gestured. "I know. You walk past here every Tuesday and Thursday. Sometimes Monday if you have an early meeting." The boy turned a page. "You wear better shoes than most of the people who walk this block." Harrison sat down on the bench beside him, a choice that surprised him even as he made it. "What are you reading?" The boy held up the book. The pages were brown at the edges, and several had been folded down at the corners. Harrison could make out Steinbeck in faint ink along the spine. East of Eden, for the third time, Felix said. It's better each time. He paused. I think you understand something different depending on how old you are. You're what, 11? 12, said with some dignity. And 3 months. That's a complicated book for 12 and 3 months. Most things are complicated, Felix said simply. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Harrison sat with that for a moment. Below them, a city bus hissed to a stop and disgorged a crowd of people who scattered immediately in all directions like a spilled bag of marbles. Felix watched them with an expression Harrison couldn't quite name, not longing, not sadness, more like the careful attention of someone memorizing something. Where do you live? Harrison asked. A small pause. Around. I move, Felix said. He closed the book, marking his place with a folded receipt. It's safer. Something tightened in Harrison's chest. He didn't push. He hired a private investigator 6 days later. Her name was Doris Shen, and she was the best in the city at finding things people had misplaced. Children, assets, truths. He gave her the boy's first name, his approximate age, his corner, his shoes. That's not a lot to go on, Doris said. He reads Steinbeck, Harrison offered. That narrows it down to maybe 3 homeless 12-year-olds in the metro area. Is that a joke? Barely. She looked at him over her reading glasses. You already know where he is. Harrison thought about the shoes, about the 4-minute conversation that had been rattling around in his head for 2 weeks, about the way the boy had said most things are complicated, with the total calm of someone who had arrived at this conclusion through experience rather than philosophy. I want to know if he's safe, Harrison said. Doris looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened her notepad. All right. What she found took 4 days and came in a manila envelope that Harrison opened alone in his office at 7 in the morning with the door closed. Felix Arroyo, born October 14th, 12 years and 4 months ago at St. Catherine's Hospital. Mother, Rennie Arroyo, deceased. A car accident on the interstate 3 years prior, black ice. She'd been working a double shift and driving home just after 2 in the morning. No surviving immediate family listed. Father unknown, the birth certificate a blank space where a name should have been. The next 3 pages were harder to read. Felix had been in the system since age 9. 2 foster placements, both ending in circumstances Doris had noted with the careful bureaucratic language of someone who'd learned to file the edges off of terrible things. Placement disruption due to household instability. Child requested reassignment following conflict with foster sibling. The second placement had ended 8 months ago. Since then, according to what Doris had been able to piece together from school records and shelter intake logs, Felix had been moving. He was currently attending Waverly Middle School, irregularly, but attending. His grades when he showed up were exceptional. His English teacher had flagged him twice for academic enrichment programs. Both times, the paperwork had gone nowhere. At the bottom of the last page, Doris had written a single line in her own handwriting, not part of the official report. This one's been slipping through. Somebody should catch him. Harrison sat with the envelope in his hands for a long time. Then he called his lawyer. It did not go smoothly, because nothing involving child welfare bureaucracy ever goes smoothly, and because Lackland found out on a Wednesday and called Harrison 4 times in a row, the last call at 10:40 p.m. You're trying to foster a child, Lackland said. Not a question. I've begun the process, yes, Dad. The long silence of someone choosing words. You're 61. I'm aware of how old I am. You run a company. Also aware. You don't. Dad, you don't even have a pet. You had a plant and it died. The plant situation was not my fault. It was a watering issue. This is a child. I know, Lackland. Harrison's voice came out quieter than he'd intended. That's why I'm doing it. Another silence. This one different, longer, more complex. Harrison could hear his son breathing and could almost feel the effort of recalibration happening on the other end of the line. Lackland had always processed things this way, even as a small boy. He went very still and very quiet, and when he came back he was usually somewhere different than where he'd started. He's 12? Lackland finally said. 12 and 4 months. Does he know about this? Not yet, I thought. Harrison stopped. I wanted to be further along before I said anything to him. In case it doesn't work out, but you're still talking to him. Every Tuesday and Thursday. Another pause. What do you talk about? Harrison thought about their last conversation, which had lasted 40 minutes and covered Steinbeck's use of biblical allegory, the hydraulic braking system of city buses, the migratory patterns of monarch butterflies, and whether it was possible to get a library card without a fixed address. "Books, mostly," he said, "and other things." Lachlan made a sound that might have been the very beginning of something softening. "I want to meet him," he said, "eventually, if it works out. Of course, don't get attached before you know if it's going to work." But it was already too late for that, and they both knew it. Felix found out on a Thursday in December, which was also the day the temperature finally dropped below freezing and stayed there. Harrison arrived at the corner to find the boy had added a second jacket. A woman's, too large, powder blue, layered over his own, and that the electrical tape on his left shoe had been replaced with duct tape, which somehow made it worse. They talked for a few minutes about nothing. The cold, a headline Felix had read in a paper someone had left on the bench, and then Harrison took a breath. "I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear me out before you say anything." Felix closed his book. His expression didn't change much, but his hands stilled in his lap, which Harrison had learned was the boy's version of paying close attention. "I've been looking into some things," Harrison said, "about your situation. And I know I should have asked you first, and I'm sorry I didn't, but I want to explain what I did and why." He watched the boy's face. Still, listening. "I started the paperwork for emergency foster certification 3 weeks ago, and my lawyer filed a placement request through the county last Tuesday." Silence. "I know that's a lot," Harrison said, "and I know you don't know me very well. We've been talking for 6 weeks, Felix said quietly. "And 2 days, Harrison blinked. "Yes." He paused. "You've been counting." The boy looked down at his hands. Something moved across his face that Harrison couldn't quite read, a complicated weather pattern, too many things shifting at once. "Why are you doing this?" Felix said, not hostile, not tearful, genuinely asking, the way he asked everything, like the answer was data he needed to process properly. Harrison thought about Margaret, about the house that had been too quiet for 6 years, about Lachlan growing up and away, which was exactly as it should be, but had left a particular shape of silence that Harrison had gotten used to and stopped thinking of as loneliness and started thinking of as just how things were. About a boy who'd said most things are complicated. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, and hadn't even known he was saying something Harrison needed to hear. "Because you're falling through," Harrison said, "and I have a house with 3 empty bedrooms, and apparently I'm not done yet." He stopped. "And because I think you're exceptional, Felix. I think you know things that most people spend their whole lives not figuring out, and I don't want to watch you disappear into a system that doesn't know what to do with you." Felix was quiet for a very long time. Then, "I don't want your pity." "Good, I'm not offering it." Another long pause. A bus went by. 2 pigeons conducted a brief and intense negotiation over a piece of something on the sidewalk. "I had 2 foster homes," Felix said finally. "The first one was fine for 7 months, and then the dad lost his job and it just got hard for everyone, and I wasn't helping. The second one." He stopped. "The second one had a rule that I wasn't allowed in the kitchen." Harrison kept his expression still, though it cost him something. I'm just telling you," Felix said. "So you know I've done this before." "I know, and that I'm not easy. I assumed." Something that might almost have been the beginning of a smile. "You have a plant that died." The plant was a series of misunderstandings. "How many bedrooms did you say?" 3. Felix picked up his book. He didn't open it. He just held it, looking at the blank spine, and when he finally spoke, his voice was carefully even in the way of someone keeping something from spilling. "Okay," he said. "I'll think about it." It took another 2 weeks. Harrison didn't push. He showed up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they talked about books and bus systems, and once, memorably, a 40-minute conversation about whether bridges were more beautiful when they were functional or when they were purely ornamental, during which Felix made 3 arguments Harrison couldn't counter. On the second Thursday of December, Felix showed up at the corner with a small backpack, the same one Harrison had always seen him with, and said, "I talked to my caseworker." "And?" "She said the paperwork went through." He adjusted the strap on his shoulder. "She seemed surprised that someone your age wanted to do this. I'll try not to take that personally. She said you passed all the checks." A pause. She did a lot of checks. I know. I filled out a lot of forms. Felix looked at him, then he looked at the street, then back. I have rules, he said. Things I need, tell me. I need to be able to leave if it doesn't work. Properly, through the right channels, not just, I need to know there's an exit that isn't me disappearing. Yes, always, I need to keep going to Waverley until the end of the year. My English teacher is doing this poetry unit in January, and I don't want to miss it. Done. And I need. He stopped, looked at his shoes. The duct tape had started to peel at the corner. I need you to not make it a big thing. The moving in, I don't want it to be a big thing. Harrison understood. He'd learned enough in 6 weeks to understand. I'll have someone bring a box to the corner. You put your stuff in it and we'll take a cab. 15 minutes, door to door. Felix nodded. Okay. They stood there for a moment on the corner of Magnolia and Fifth, and the city doing its city things all around them, and then Felix picked up his paper cup from the bench and held it out toward Harrison. This one's actually yours, he said. I got it for you. Hot chocolate. The good kind, from the place on 7th. Harrison took the cup. It was warm in his hands, and the steam came up around them both in the cold air. Thank you, Felix. Don't make it a big thing, the boy said, but he was already almost smiling. Lachlan came to dinner on a Sunday in January, which was the first time he and Felix were in the same room. Harrison had made his mother's roast chicken, badly, and then ordered Thai food, which arrived at the same time Lachlan did. Felix assessed Lachlan from across the kitchen, with the same calm attention he applied to everything. The practiced observation of someone who'd learned that you needed to figure out people quickly. Lachlan, to his credit, looked directly back at him without the strained brightness that most adults affected around children they were trying to impress. He said, "You're reading East of Eden," Lachlan said finally. "For the 4th time now," Felix said. "What do you make of the Kathy character?" Felix tilted his head. "She's a monster. But the book's interested in whether monsters are made or born. Do you think they're made or born?" Lachlan set down his jacket. "Sit down," he said. "This is going to take a while." Harrison stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room and listened to his son and this boy argue about free will and moral determinism over pad see ew and spring rolls, and felt something loosen in his chest that he hadn't known was tight. The trouble came in February, the way trouble usually comes, quietly, sideways, from a direction nobody was watching. A man showed up at Harrison's offices claiming to be Felix's father. His name was Garrett Noon, and he was 43 and thin in the unhealthy way of someone who had made a series of sustained bad choices over many years. And he had hired an attorney, a real one, not a good one, but a real one, who had filed paperwork asserting parental rights that Garrett Noon claimed he'd never signed away. Because there were no rights to sign away, Doris told Harrison in his office, spreading papers across his desk. He wasn't on the birth certificate, but he's claiming he didn't know Rennie was pregnant. He's claiming he's been looking for the boy for 3 years. Has he been? Doris looked at him. He filed one inquiry with the county. In November. She paused. After Felix was placed with you. Harrison sat back. How did he know about the placement? That's what I'm trying to find out. The answer came 3 days later. Noon had a cousin in the county social service department. Not in Felix's case specifically, but close enough. An unofficial conversation, a name mentioned, and then a lawyer hired. Because Harrison Caldwell was a name associated with real estate portfolios and a publicly traded company, and the kind of assets that make people who otherwise wouldn't bother suddenly find paternal instinct very compelling. Lachlan found out before Harrison could tell him, and arrived at the house at 9 at night with his jaw set in the expression that meant he'd already made decisions and was here to implement them. "I have 3 attorneys in my contacts," he said. "I have 2, Harrison said. "Between us, that's 5. Felix doesn't know yet." Lachlan stopped. "When are you going to tell him? When I know enough to tell him the truth without panicking him." Lachlan was quiet for a moment, doing the processing thing, going still and deep. "He's going to find out," he said. "I know. He's 12. He's been lied to by omission before. He'll feel it." Harrison looked at his son. "When did you get so perceptive?" "I've been paying attention," Lachlan said. "Since January." They told Felix on a Thursday, sitting at the kitchen table with mugs of hot chocolate, because that was the thing, by then, that Felix associated with conversations that required sitting still. Harrison laid it out plainly. Who Garrett Noon was, what he'd filed, what it meant, and what they were doing about it. Felix listened with his hands around his mug and his face very still. "He wants money," Felix said, when Harrison finished. "We don't know that for certain." Felix looked at him, 12 years old, 4 months, with the eyes of someone who had learned very young to read the subtext. "He wasn't on the birth certificate. He didn't file anything until after you, until after I was placed here." He paused. "I'm not stupid. I know. I know you're not. Is he going to take me?" "No," Harrison said. And then, more carefully, "He has no documented relationship with you. He has no legal standing. What he has is a lawyer and a theory, and we have 4 attorneys and 3 months of established placement and a caseworker who filed a glowing review." He looked at Felix steadily. "I am not going to let that happen. Do you understand me?" Lachlan across the table said, "Neither am I." Felix looked from one of them to the other. Something shifted in his face, not relief, not yet, but something adjacent to it. The first step toward a thing that isn't quite trust yet, but is moving in that direction. "Okay," he said. He picked up his mug. "Put it down. I'd like to talk about something else now." "Sure," Harrison said. "What do you want to talk about? Whether the 7th Street Bridge is structurally compromised, or if the city is just being overcautious about the load limits." Lachlan blinked. "That's a specific topic. I have opinions." Clearly. Lachlan looked at Harrison with an expression Harrison had not seen on his son's face in a long time, something open, almost delighted. "Okay, make your case." The hearing was in March. Harrison's attorneys had spent 6 weeks building something solid and thorough, and Doris Shen had spent those same 6 weeks being very effective at her job, which resulted in a 40-page report that documented Garrett Noon's one-county inquiry, his cousin's social services connection, and the timeline of his attorney hire in relation to news coverage of the Caldwell Group's most recent acquisition. The family court judge was a woman named Whitmore, who had been on the bench for 17 years, and who read the 40-page report with the expression of someone who had seen this exact pattern before. It took 8 minutes of deliberation. Garrett Noon's petition was dismissed. The established placement was affirmed. Harrison's foster certification was upgraded to long-term placement status, pending the 12-month evaluation. Doris texted Harrison one word when it was over: caught. Harrison was standing in the hallway outside the courtroom when Felix, who had been waiting with Lachlan at the far end of the corridor, walked toward him. He walked the way he always walked, steady, measured, like someone who had learned to conserve energy, and when he reached Harrison, he stopped and looked up at him. "Well?" Felix said. "Dismissed," Harrison said. Felix nodded once, the way he always processed information, receiving it, filing it, running it through whatever internal system he used to decide what it meant. Then he reached out and put his hand briefly on Harrison's arm. Not a hug. Felix had made it clear early that he wasn't a person who hugged, which Harrison had respected, but something deliberate, something chosen. "Thank you," Felix said, "for catching me." Harrison put his hand over the boy's for a moment. "I should have been faster," he said, "but I've got you now." Lachlan, appearing at Felix's elbow, said, "The bridge argument is still unresolved, by the way. I've been doing research." Felix turned to look at him with a particular expression that meant an argument of significant length was incoming. "The load limit data is publicly available. I pulled the 2019 inspection report." "Of course you did. You'll find my analysis compelling." "I doubt that." They walked down the courthouse steps together into the cold March afternoon, arguing about bridges, the boy's borrowed jacket just slightly too large at the shoulders, the laces of his shoes, new shoes, the right size, tied in a single ordinary knot, clicking against the stone steps. Harrison walked behind them a little, listening to the sound of it, and thought about Margaret the way he still sometimes did at moments that she would have loved. She would have loved this, he thought. She would have loved this very much. Some things you don't plan. Some things just find you on a street corner on a cold morning, holding a cup of coffee that isn't yours, steady-voiced and unasked for, and you nearly walk past them. Harrison was glad he hadn't.